the moment my dad's voice boomed through the kitchen. I felt the weight of his anger press down on me. "How could you bring this shame on our family, Emma?" he shouted, his words echoing off the walls. He was standing at the head of the table, his face twisted in a mix of disappointment and rage, like I had done something unforgivable. I felt paralyzed, sitting there at the table, my heart racing in my chest. My sister, Eliza, leaned against the counter with her arms crossed, her lips pressed together in a tight line. She wasn't saying anything, but I could feel her eyes on me, cold and judgmental. It felt like the entire room was closing in on me, and I didn't know what to do. The weight of their disbelief was crushing. "I'm Emma Morgan, I'm 26 years old, and tonight, everything in my life was falling apart." My dad, the only parent I had left, was staring at me like I wasn't even his daughter. Eliza, my twin sister, the one who had always been perfect, wasn't even trying to defend me. She was just watching, waiting for me to crack under the pressure. And there I was, accused of something I didn't do, with no one on my side. I was completely alone. It all started a few weeks ago when a bunch of court orders showed up at my dad's house. Each one was more alarming than the last. They said I had missed payments on loans I knew nothing about, loans I had no memory of ever taking out. I'd gotten strange calls about loans I supposedly had to repay, but I had ignored them, thinking they were scams. But now, the accusations were real. Legal threats hung over me like a dark cloud, and I couldn't escape them. That was when everything started to spiral out of control. "I didn't do it, Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, even though it was shaking. "I don't know how this happened, but I swear it wasn't me." Eliza, who hadn't said much up until then, finally spoke. Her voice dripped with sarcasm. "Come on, Emma, are you seriously trying to deny it? Your name is on all the documents, everyone can see it. Why don't you just tell the truth and stop making this harder than it has to be?" I looked at her, trying to stay calm, but it was like she was rubbing salt in an open wound. I turned to my dad, pleading for him to believe me. "Dad, please, someone's framing me. I don't know how or why, but I didn't do this." But my dad didn't seem to care. His expression was cold, and he shook his head like he had already made up his mind. "So, what you're saying is, this is all a coincidence? The loans, the complaints, everything? Why would they target you for no reason?" I swallowed, trying to steady my breath. "Because they're using my name, Dad. Someone is making this up. I didn't do it." Eliza rolled her eyes and sighed. "Really, Emma? Framed? Who would go through all that trouble to frame you? And why you, of all people? It sounds like you're just making excuses." Dad's face twisted in frustration. "Emma, I've tried to be patient with you, but this is too much. You're not a child anymore. You need to take responsibility for your actions. Until you do, I don't want you here." Those words hit me harder than any slap. It was like the ground had been pulled out from under me. "Dad, you're kicking me out?" I whispered, barely able to breathe. I stood frozen in place as my dad's words sunk in. The room felt like it was spinning. Eliza shook her head dramatically, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I hate to see this happen, but maybe some time away will help you figure things out, Emma." I could feel my anger building inside me. "You're loving this, aren't you?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You've always been perfect, and now you're just watching me get blamed for something I didn't do." But Dad didn't even blink. "Eliza isn't the problem here, Emma, you are. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Pack your things and leave, now." His tone left no room for argument, and my heart shattered. I didn't know what to do or where to go. No matter what I said, no one was listening. I packed my bags in silence, each item feeling heavier than the last. My childhood room felt strange now, like a place that belonged to someone else, not me. Eliza stood in the doorway, watching me with a look I couldn't quite understand. "I wish it didn't have to be this way," she said softly, but her words didn't sound sincere. There was something off about it. I didn't turn around as I stuffed clothes into my duffel bag. "Yeah, me too," I muttered, feeling like I was going to break down at any second. She sighed. "It just looks so bad right now, Emma. Maybe some time away will help you figure out how this happened." I froze for a second, gripping the edge of the dresser. "I didn't do this," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I don't know how or why it's happening, but I swear I didn't do it." Eliza sighed again, stepping back into the hallway. "I hope you figure it out. For your sake, I really do." Her words felt hollow, like she was saying what she thought she should say, not what she really meant. I finished packing my bag, zipped it up, and walked out of the room without another word. I felt like everything I knew was slipping away, and I couldn't stop it. The cold night air hit me as soon as I stepped outside. My duffel bag hung heavy on my shoulder, and I could feel the sting of the past behind me. The house I grew up in now a distant memory. It felt wrong to leave, but I had no choice. As I walked down the driveway, I looked back at the window, where the faint light still glowed. My dad hadn't even come outside to say goodbye. He had made his decision, and there was nothing left for me there. Eliza's words kept echoing in my head. I hope you figure it out, for your sake. But they didn't feel like they had any real meaning behind them. They just stung. How had everything gotten so twisted? Why was I being blamed for something I didn't do? I didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to stop until I found them. Something didn't make sense, and I was going to figure out the truth, even if no one believed me. I paused for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts before I spoke. What if, hypothetically, someone stole my identity and used it to open those loans? Would that change anything? David leaned forward, his sharp eyes focusing on me. He seemed to think about my question for a second before answering. If your identity was stolen, that's a serious issue. You wouldn't be responsible for the loans legally, but you'd need to prove it wasn't you who opened them. That means filing a police report, letting the lenders know, and disputing the accounts with the credit bureaus. I felt a small flicker of hope at his words, but the question that followed seemed to make my stomach drop. And what happens if I can't prove it wasn't me? My voice was barely a whisper, filled with fear. David's expression became more serious. Then it gets much more complicated. The burden of proof is on you to show that you didn't open the accounts. If you can't do that, the lenders will continue to treat you as the responsible party. But if you have any evidence, like proof you were somewhere else when the loans were opened or inconsistencies in the documents, that could help. I felt a wave of dread wash over me as his words sank in. So, paying off the loans won't clear my name if they still think I opened them? David shook his head slightly. Not entirely. Paying them off would stop the legal actions for defaulting, but the loans would still be on your record. The lenders would still assume you're the one who opened them unless you can prove otherwise. If there's even a chance that someone else did this, you need to investigate now. The longer you wait, the harder it will be to gather evidence. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words. His advice made sense, but it also meant that I couldn't avoid the truth any longer. David's voice softened a little as he continued. If you can prove that your identity was stolen and you weren't the one who opened the loans, you won't be held responsible for the debts. The lenders will close the fraudulent accounts and stop pursuing you. Your credit report can be corrected, and the negative marks will be removed. I felt a brief sense of relief, but another question popped into my head. And what happens to the person who stole my identity? David's tone became firmer, his gaze steady. That depends. If you provide evidence of identity theft, it becomes a criminal matter. Law enforcement could get involved, and the person responsible could face charges for fraud, forgery, or other crimes. Penalties could range from fines to restitution, and in some cases, even prison time, depending on how serious the case is. I swallowed, the idea of someone being punished for something that had ruined my life suddenly weighing heavily on me. So if I provide proof, I'll be cleared, but the person who did this could end up in a lot of trouble. David met my eyes. Yes, but your first priority has to be clearing your name. If someone close to you is behind this, I know it might feel complicated, but you have to remember this isn't just about money, it's about justice, it's about protecting yourself from further harm. His words hit me hard. I thought about Eliza, my twin sister, the person who I had trusted most. If it was her, I would have to make a decision. I couldn't let her actions ruin my life, but the thought of sending her to jail made my stomach churn. That's when a plan started to form in my mind. I would confront Eliza, but on my terms. My family had a tradition of holding a big reunion every year, where everyone came together. I decided that during the reunion, I would reveal everything. I'd present the proof of what she had done. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal, to see the hurt in our father's eyes, and to be held accountable for how she had messed up my life. But I wasn't going to call the authorities, not yet. I wasn't going to let her face the worst consequences, not if she agreed to make things right. Eliza would have to fix this. She would settle the loans she had taken out in my name, and she would take full responsibility without dragging me through more humiliation or legal battles. It would be a compromise, one that spared her from the worst while still giving me the justice I deserved. The family reunion was only a week away. That gave me just enough time to gather everything I needed, every document, Every piece of evidence, everything that would leave no room for Eliza to deny what she'd done. This time, there would be no escaping it. Eliza wouldn't be able to talk her way out of it. She would face the truth, and so would everyone else.